To win an information war today, a government doesn't actually need to convince you that they are right. They just need to create enough noise to permanently destroy your ability to believe that any truth exists at all.
Yeah, it is a complete structural shift in how reality is manufactured. And, most of us don't even realize we are caught in the machinery.
Right. So we are going to expose a massive systemic risk to how you consume reality. We've got our hands on a comprehensive open source intelligence dossier and OSINT report.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
It really is, and it completely dissects the digital propaganda surrounding the 2022 Bucha tragedy. By breaking down this massive document, we're going to reveal the exact anatomy of a digital lie.
Exactly. You're going to see how it's engineered, why your brain is basically hardwired to fall for it, and ultimately the space-age technology required to defeat it.
But before we pull this apart, let's establish the boundaries for this deep dive.
Yeah, as your guides today, we are not here to debate politics or take sides. We're impartially reporting the exact mechanics, the timelines, and the forensic data laid out in these intelligence documents.
Purely the facts from the source.
Right. The goal is strictly to understand the operational playbook of modern information ecosystems and how specific vulnerabilities in our media consumption are actively exploited.
So let's set the baseline reality, according to the UN and international human rights groups, just the physical facts on the ground.
Sure.
Russian forces controlled the Ukrainian city of Bucha from March 4th to March 31st, 2022. Around April 1st and 2nd, the world saw horrifying images emerging from the city. Over 450 deceased civilians left on the streets.
And the very millisecond those images hit the global internet, a specific strategy known as the fire hose of falsehood was activated.
The fire hose of falsehood. I mean, that concept is critical to grasp if you want to understand modern media.
It really is. Because during the Cold War, a state would try to sell you one, like tightly controlled, ideologically pure narrative. It was slow and methodical.
Right, very top down.
Exactly. But in the digital age, that model is totally obsolete. The new strategy is to blast out multiple, often entirely contradictory versions of an event at lightning speed. You just flood the zone.
The goal isn't even persuasion anymore.
No, not at all. The goal is cognitive exhaustion. You want the audience to throw their hands up, overwhelmed, and say, well, I guess we'll never know the real truth.
Which brings us to the craziest part of this dossier, like where the propaganda actually
Yeah,
originated.
this part blew my mind.
You'd think a major geopolitical defense would launch with a polished state media broadcast
For
or a stern press conference. It didn't. It started with an anonymous Telegram channel.
Right. On April 3rd, at exactly 14:28 Moscow time, a Telegram channel called War on Fakes posted a video.
Okay, let's unpack this. What was the video?
It was a highly compressed, low-resolution clip originally sourced from a Ukrainian channel, Espresso TV. The footage was shot from a moving car driving down Yablinska Street in Bucha, showing bodies on the road.
And this anonymous channel makes an incredibly wild claim right out of the gate.
Yeah, they state unequivocally that the bodies on the street are living actors.
Wait, really? Living actors?
Yep. They tell their followers to look closely, claiming one corpse is clearly moving its arm, and that another body, caught in the car's rearview mirror, is sitting up just after the car passes.
Well, and then what?
Within hours, literally hours, top diplomats and official state channels are repeating this exact Telegram post to the entire world.
So they bypassed traditional channels entirely. It's like an information laundromat.
That's a great way to put it. This Telegram channel aggressively styled itself as an independent fact-checker. They used all the visual language of modern open source intelligence.
Slapping massive bright red, fake, and green true stamps on photo collages, that sort of thing.
Exactly. By hijacking the format of fact-checking, they bypass your brain's critical thinking defenses.
Because if a state official stands at a podium and says, "We didn't do it," your skepticism naturally spikes. But if an edgy, supposedly independent fact-checker posts a breakdown exposing a movie set, you let your guard down.
You feel like you're being let in on a secret. And they preconditioned the audience for this, too.
How so?
Weeks before Bucha was even in the news, this same Telegram channel was planting rumors that Hollywood producers were gathering in Poland. They claim these producers were preparing to shoot fake videos of urban destruction using crisis actors.
Oh, wow. So they were seeding the narrative soil.
Precisely. So when the Espresso TV video finally drops, the audience's brain is already primed. They are actively looking for the actors they were promised.
But the real OSINT community, The global network of actual open source investigators, they immediately zeroed in on this moving arm video.
Oh, yeah. And the forensic breakdown they did is just a masterclass in digital realities.
Walk us through it. What did they find?
Well, the investigators didn't rely on the Telegram clip. They went and obtained the original high-resolution 4K uncompressed broadcast file of that exact same video.
Right.
When you look at the raw data, the forensic reality is undeniable. They slowed the footage down frame by frame and inverted the color spectrum to highlight contrast.
And the moving arm.
That moving arm was a raindrop sliding down the car's windshield.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
A raindrop.
A raindrop. The propagandists had deliberately cut the video the exact fraction of a second before the raindrop slid completely past the body on the street. They isolated that tiny optical illusion.
That is wild.
Furthermore, they relied heavily on video compression artifacts.
What does that mean exactly?
When you compress a high-definition video down to a tiny file size for an app like Telegram, the software lowers the byte rate. To save space, the algorithm groups pixels together and guesses how they should look as the camera moves.
Oh, I see.
So when an object passes by quickly, the surrounding pixels struggle to update, creating a blocky, blurry effect that looks exactly like a twitch or a movement to the human eye.
Okay, wait. Let me guess about the body sitting up in the rearview mirror then.
Ugh.
The rearview mirror was curved, right?
You got it.
Anyone who has looked in a convex side mirror while driving on a bumpy road knows everything looks warped. If you compress a warped, bouncing reflection down to a terrible resolution, a totally motionless object is going to look like it's jittering or sitting up.
That is exactly what the 4K uncompressed footage proved. The body in the reflection is completely mathematically motionless. The distortion was entirely an artifact of the curved glass and the bumpy road.
Incredible.
They also pushed a biological claim, stating the bodies lacked rigor mortis, implying they were freshly killed or faking it.
The forensic pathologist stepped in on that one.
Yeah, they had to correct the biological record. Rigor mortis is temporary. It passes after a few days. For bodies left outside for weeks in near freezing temperatures, a complete lack of stiffness is just basic biology.
You'd think getting caught red-handed by 4K video and forensic pathologists would force them to retreat, or at least quietly delete the Telegram post.
You would think that, yeah.
But they didn't, did they? They doubled down in the most bizarre way possible.
The narrative mutated instantly. They completely abandoned the "these are living actors" theory, and within hours they seamlessly switched to, okay, the bodies are real, but the other side killed them.
Wait, isn't it insanely risky to pivot from nobody died to they died, but we didn't do it in under 3 days? Won't the audience get whiplash and notice the contradiction?
What's fascinating here is that the contradiction is the weapon.
How does that work?
They specifically started pushing a story that Ukrainian forces executed these civilians during a police operation called Safari on April 2nd. And the evidence they used to back this up was a video from the mayor of Bucha.
Right. On March 31st, the mayor posted a video smiling and celebrating the city's liberation. But he didn't mention any bodies on the streets.
So they weaponized the absence of evidence. The reality was that the mayor was filming in a completely different part of the municipality. Communications and cell towers were heavily damaged, and the streets were heavily mined, restricting movement.
But the propagandists stripped all that context away.
Exactly. They just asked a highly emotionally charged rhetorical question. If there were hundreds of bodies, why didn't the mayor mention them in his triumphant video?
And then they grabbed a totally routine Facebook post from the Ukrainian National Police about a special forces unit named Safari entering the town to clear saboteurs. They slapped the mayor's video and the police post together to manufacture a brand new timeline.
And they took it a step further into incredibly dark territory by weaponizing the white armband theory.
Explain that one.
Many of the victims photographed in Bucha had their hands tied behind their backs with white cloth or wore white armbands. The factual, verified reality, documented by survivors and human rights groups, is that occupying troops forced the locals to wear these white armbands to visually signal their compliance. White and red were the tactical colors used by the occupying forces.
But the propaganda machine inverted this reality entirely.
Completely. They pushed out a narrative claiming that when the Ukrainian Safari unit entered the town, they saw these terrified civilians wearing white armbands, automatically assumed they were enemy collaborators, and executed them in the streets.
Hold on. They went from, these are paid actors pretending to be dead, to, okay, they're dead, but the other guys killed them in the span of a single weekend.
Yes.
How does the audience not see the state totally contradicting itself? It makes zero logical sense to argue both.
Well, you are applying traditional linear logic to an algorithmic war. In the fire hose of falsehood, the contradiction isn't a mistake, it is the core weapon.
To overload your brain.
Exactly. The psychological goal is to overload your brain's processing capacity. If I give you three completely different, highly detailed, conflicting reasons why I didn't commit a crime, your brain struggles to hold all those variables at once.
You might not believe any single one of the excuses, but you walk away feeling like the entire situation is incredibly complicated, murky, and unknowable.
It's cognitive dissonance by design. They don't actually care if you believe the Safari theory or the actor theory. The only metric of success is that you doubt the empirical truth.
They take real puzzle pieces, the existence of white armbands, the real video of the mayor, the real name of a police unit, and they stitch them together into a closed-loop alternative reality.
And the truly systemic risk highlighted in this dossier is that this highly engineered lie didn't stay inside a local echo chamber.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It exported.
In several European and Latin American countries, content actively denying these atrocities gains significantly more traction and engagement on Facebook than legitimate reporting from major global news outlets.
Have you ever scrolled through your feed and seen two completely opposite facts about the same news event and just thought, I don't even know what's real anymore? That feeling isn't an accident.
No, it's highly coordinated. The export mechanism relies on what intelligence analysts call proxy influencers. For a manufactured narrative to be geopolitically useful, it has to break out of state-controlled media.
So they use local voices.
Exactly. They found a Spanish blogger named Ruben Gisbert. He traveled to controlled territories and started recording videos employing the rhetoric of an independent skeptic. He wasn't overtly pushing state talking points. He was just asking questions, casting doubt on the mainstream timeline, suggesting maybe things weren't as they seemed.
This operates exactly like a viral influencer marketing campaign. But instead of an influencer selling you a new skincare routine, they are selling you geopolitical deception.
It's incredibly effective. Gisbert's skeptical videos go viral in Spain. Then, the Spanish language division of a state network instantly picks the videos up, translates the captions, and broadcasts them across Latin America where the algorithm makes them absolutely explode.
The same structural pattern repeated in Italy, right?
Yes. A former television journalist, Tony Capuzzo, started spreading doubts. He pointed to a supposed lack of blood on the streets and leaned heavily on the mayor's March 31st video. Soon, his post completely dominated the Italian information space regarding Bucha.
So traditional Italian media was being drowned out by this one skeptical influencer whose talking points perfectly mirrored the anonymous Telegram channels.
And in Germany, it went beyond just influencers. It got deeply institutionalized.
They've happened there.
A completely fake media platform called the Journalisten Freikorps was set up on Telegram and on the web. They started planting forged, supposedly hacked documents.
Let me guess, linking the events to something crazy.
Yeah, these documents claimed to prove Ukrainian involvement in the civilian deaths and even linked the event to dark web weapon sales. These fabricated documents were then picked up by marginal, fringe websites.
And then it bubbles up to the mainstream.
Eventually, actual politicians from the far-right Alternative for Germany party started citing these fake documents publicly, demanding official parliamentary investigations based on complete fictions.
Look at the scale of this ecosystem. You have anonymous channels generating the initial lie, fake fact-checkers validating it, proxy influencers laundering it for Western audiences, and then official embassies jump in to coordinate the traffic.
The intelligence report shows embassies were actively directing citizens to follow these anonymous Telegram channels to get the real truth.
They weren't doing diplomacy. They were acting as coordinating hubs for massive bot networks to manipulate local algorithms.
It was a globally coordinated machine with practically unlimited state budgets and thousands of personnel. And yet, this entire complex apparatus was fundamentally dismantled by a tool available in the commercial market.
Satellites.
Commercial satellite imagery fundamentally changed the nature of investigative journalism during this event. Maxar Technologies collaborated with the visual forensics team at the New York Times.
You're using optical sensors in orbit that can resolve objects smaller than 50 centimeters on the Earth's surface. That is wild.
It's space-age auditing. If the propagandists are claiming a police unit killed these people on April 2nd, the satellites just need to look at the days prior.
So what does this all mean? How did they use it?
The OSINT researchers took the horrific ground-level videos from April 1st and geolocated them. They pinpointed the exact GPS coordinates of the bodies on Yablunska Street. Once they had those exact coordinates, they went into Maxar's archive and pulled satellite imagery of that specific grid from the middle of March.
Back when the city was deep behind occupying lines.
Exactly, weeks before the mayor's video. And they didn't just find blurry shapes. The level of detail from orbit is staggering. The images proved that dark objects matching the exact size and shape of human bodies appeared on Jablinska Street between March 9th and March 21st.
They matched the positions pixel by pixel.
Yes. The spatial relationship between a specific body, an abandoned car, a discarded bicycle, the exact pattern of debris on the road, it aligned with absolute mathematical precision with the April 1st ground footage.
Couldn't they argue the photos were from a different time?
No, because they could even use the length and angle of shadows cast by buildings and trees to verify the exact time of day the satellite images were captured, ruling out any possibility of temporal manipulation.
It even verified that the specific body next to the car, the one the War on Face channel claimed was an actor moving its arm, had been lying in that exact spot, in that exact posture, since at least March 21st.
The satellites also captured the digging of a 45-foot mass grave at the Church of St. Andrew on March 10th. The chronological data is devastating to the manufactured narrative.
Right, because if those bodies were lying on the pavement since mid-March, the entire narrative about a police unit executing people on April 2nd is physically, temporally impossible.
The satellites provided an objective, verifiable anchor to reality that couldn't be argued with.
You can't lie about your timeline when someone is literally auditing your movements from space. And the investigators didn't stop at the visual data, did they?
No, the New York Times eventually combined this special data with intercepted radio chatter and mobile phone billings. They traced phone calls made by soldiers who were using the stolen cell phones of the victims right back to identifying specific commanders of the 234th Guards Air Assault Regiment.
This represents a systemic shift in how reality is monitored. Historically, if a state occupied a physical zone, they held a complete monopoly on reality within that zone. They controlled the journalists, the cameras, the flow of physical evidence.
But today, the state has lost that monopoly. A decentralized global community of digital investigators sitting at their laptops thousands of miles away can reconstruct a crime scene pixel by pixel.
But there's a glaring problem here. The OSINT community realized that just debunking the lies in a brilliant article isn't enough anymore. The fire hose of falsehood doesn't care about an article.
Exactly. It will just wash the article away with 10,000 new fabricated posts by next week.
Which brings us to the final evolution detailed in the dossier. Organizations like Bellingcat and a human rights group called Mnemonic recognized that they needed to secure this digital evidence for the long term.
Right. They started building dynamic, continuously updated databases of every video, photo, and audio intercept related to potential war crimes.
But how do you prove, say, 5 or 10 years from now, that a video in your database wasn't doctored? If the propagandists are already claiming real videos are fake, what stops them from cloning the database is just an elaborate fabrication.
That is where cryptographic hashing becomes essential. When investigators verify a piece of media checking the geolocation, the shadows, the software metadata, they run the raw file through a specific algorithm. This algorithm generates a unique cryptographic hash.
Think of a cryptographic hash like a digital wax seal on an envelope. The algorithm looks at every single pixel, every audio wave, the underlying code of the file, and generates a massively complex math equation.
And if someone tries to go in later and Photoshop a single cloud in the sky, even if the human eye can't possibly see the change, the math equation completely breaks. The wax seal shatters.
The hash proves mathematically that the file existed in its exact unmanipulated state at that specific moment in time.
Yes. If even one byte of data is altered later, the hash changes entirely. This establishes a strict, legally rigorous chain of custody.
It's literally sealing the truth in digital amber. Because that chain of custody is maintained by math, no future regime or legal defense team can ever walk into the International Criminal Court and claim, oh, that video of Jablinska Street was generated by AI, or that was made in a Hollywood studio.
It creates an unchangeable digital ledger of reality. This dossier forces a complete reevaluation of how authoritarian control operates in the 21st century.
Right. The old assumption was that an autocratic regime controls information through silence. They censor the news, they cut the phone lines, they put journalists in prison, and they make sure nothing gets out.
But the new reality, the one mapped out step by step in this Bucha report, is that they control information through deafening noise. They don't need to cut your internet cable, they just hand out megaphones to 1 million bots and proxy influencers.
They weaponize confusion to the point where the public simply gives up trying to find the truth because it takes too much energy.
It is a profound vulnerability in open societies, and it leaves us with an incredibly urgent, unresolved node to consider. We just walked through how a global coalition of open source researchers, utilizing commercial satellite data and intense human forensic analysis, managed to defeat a massive state sponsored lie in 2022.
But technology does not stand still.
It doesn't. As generative AI video becomes entirely indistinguishable from reality, and as the deployment of the fire hose of falsehood becomes fully automated by large language models, the cost of generating this noise will drop to absolute zero.
They won't need human proxy influencers or Telegram channel.
Exactly. Millions of perfectly localized, contradictory narratives can be generated and deployed per second. So will cryptographic hashing and digital wax seals be enough to save our shared reality? Or are we rapidly entering an era where seeing is genuinely no longer believing?
Next time you see a viral video in your feed forcefully debunking a major news event, look at the timeline. Look at the compression artifacts. Look at who's benefiting from your sudden sense of confusion. Because the ultimate target of the fire hose of falsehood isn't the enemy state. The target is your own mind. It's your capacity to believe that objective truth exists at all. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. The information ecosystem is a battlefield, so stay curious, stay highly critical, and keep questioning the narratives that pop up in your own feeds. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.